Hello. Yes, everything is bigger in America, especially in Texas, where you're from. We know about these data centers, right, that are powering ChatGPT and all the AI that we use. They consume gigawatts of energy. So I want to know, where does Applied Digital sit in the data center sphere? Can you just kind of explain what you guys do?
Yeah, thank you. So Applied Digital, I would say we are one of, if not the leading company for what we have termed a few years ago, next generation digital infrastructure. So that's high power density, the cooling, the power, the location, the fiber to go along with that. But we find location, we design, we build, and we operate full stack for data centers. And then we primarily cater to hyperscalers. So we announced last month a large contract with CoreWeave for our facility in North Dakota. We're building that campus. We have 2 other campuses in North Dakota, 1 in South Dakota, and several in other states. But really the goal for us is, right now, large scale, gigawatt style campuses that are going to be, right now mostly used for training, but also work for a lot of inference as well. But we kicked off this journey back in 22 prior to ChatGPT being introduced, and we've just accelerated, through now.
Yeah, so you're sort of like the landlord for AI. But you didn't start with AI, right? Like you said, you started off with crypto mining, and then decided to transition. And CoreWeave is another example of that. How much more complicated is an AI, factory, as some people call it, compared to a crypto mining operation?
Sure. So we started out. I would, clarify that we were always a data center focused company. So we built Bitcoin data centers starting in 2021. We built 500 megawatts of Bitcoin data centers. We did not mine Bitcoin ourselves. We just ran data center operations for Bitcoin miners, Marathon being our largest customers, the largest Bitcoin miner in the world. So we kind of started out doing hyperscale Bitcoin mining data centers, built that out very quickly. And there's similarities, and then there's stark contrasts to these. So the similarities are, we need large amounts of power, and then that's kind of where it stops. And you use some of the same power infrastructure to build these. You are building them at high density, but the cooling is very different. The redundancy is different. The need for fiber, Bitcoin, you don't really need connectivity for. So back in 2022, so we started building all of this capacity for Bitcoin, and then in 22, when we started focusing more on what we called HPC at the time, and now we've evolved that into AI factories, because really the builds are very different than HPC builds of the past. We started focusing on the ingredients that we needed for a site, which is, land usually isn't the issue. Power is the number one issue. So power, and not just the power we were using for Bitcoin, because in Bitcoin you can use interruptible power. For high performance computing and AI factories, you have to have firm power that stays on 24/7, 365, so that was different. And then you need robust fiber connectivity to the sites, and that doesn't mean that you have one fiber line to a site. It means that you have 2 or 3 diverse paths of significant bandwidth running from the site that go north, south, east, west. And so we started to focus on that because there's a significant difference, but the builds are dramatically different. And we've kind of been through the iterations of the build where we first said, okay, let's see if we can retrofit our Bitcoin facilities. And we, pretty early on, we stopped doing that. So we did that back in 22. And then in 23, and late in 22 and 23, we were building kind of a stripped down version of what would be a tier 3 data center, so no backup gen. Some of the other things were taken out of it. We built a small scale of that at our Jamestown, North Dakota facility, and then we decided that was not the way, and then we're building our current version, which is really tier 3 data center, but for extreme high power density.
Yeah, I think Mike Intrater, the CEO of CoreWeave, told me that we were building these Bitcoin mining things in like chicken coops. I think he was just joking, but like it wasn't as important to have, you could have like a GPU fail when you're doing a Bitcoin mining operation. With these things, you can't, right? I mean, one GPU goes out, that can ruin a training run. So how do you do you have to worry about air quality, things like that?
Yeah, so with Bitcoin mining, it's not far off from a chicken coop, right? So if you went and looked at our facilities, and I think we build really good Bitcoin facilities, but long, fairly skinny building. You have a row from bottom to top of Bitcoin miners, a single row. You have a filter wall on one side, and then the wall is open on the other side, and louvers, so you could close it on both sides, and then you just blow air through it, right? Airflow runs through the entire length of the building, creates, dust. In North Dakota, sometimes snow gets in. You don't control for humidity whatsoever. But the ASICs, like the Bitmain ASICs, are pretty robust. And when you were doing, with CoreWeave, when they were doing Ethereum mining, you were using much lower cost GPUs. So maybe the longevity didn't matter as much. But I think as you know, and probably as everyone in this room knows, the GPUs that we're putting in these facilities now are extraordinarily expensive. And so the customers that we're hosting in our facilities, they want those GPUs to last a long time. And so you're looking more like semiconductor clean room with really tight temperature controls.
Yeah. And so this deal in North Dakota, can you give us how many megawatts is it going to be ultimately?
Sure. So the deal that we announced is 250 megawatts. It's 100 megawatts that'll turn on October and November of this year, and then another 150 that turns on in June of next year. There's a third building behind that for another 150. So this is 400 megawatts of critical IT load, which equates to, when people talk about power, there's utility power, so that's like 530 megawatts of utility power that goes down into 400 megawatts of critical IT load.
Tell me, can you explain this? Like, when you say it's 500 megawatts, does that mean it's running, that's the maximum capacity that might run, or is it like just constantly running at that rate?
So it's not the max, but so let me just step through the 530 down to 400. So the excess power is used for mechanical and cooling. So the measure we talk about is the IT load that you can actually run. How many servers can you plug in? And then there's the other power has to be used for how much you have to use for the cooling, and then some mechanical. But these facilities, and then the way we've designed and the way you have to design for the customers that we're going for on the hyperscale side is you need 5 nines of redundancy, so these can basically never be down, and you need to be able to design the facility and the campus, by the way, to be able to run at 100% on the hottest day of the year in North Dakota, which maybe is still not that hot. It does get hot during the days there, but in the summer. But you have to design it for that. Typically, though, your customers are going to run at like 70 to 80% of the workload capacity, and then it's not going to be the hottest day in North Dakota every day of the year, so you're going to have a lot of excess power left. But for these aren't mission critical workloads, but you still run them at 5 nines, so you have to build for that kind of spec.
And where are you getting all of the power? I know a lot of it's coming from wind, from excess wind, but can you give us like a detailed breakdown, like percentage wise, where the power is coming from?
Yeah, so I don't, off the top of my head, I don't have the breakdown, but I think the important part is, so the way we've started the company, and then the way that a lot of, I think, capacity for AI workloads can be built in the near term is we utilize what we term as stranded power. So it's power that's actually generated and not used or can't be transported out to a workload. So North Dakota is specifically not a big population base in North Dakota. It's the 6th largest wind producing state in the nation, even though the population is low. It's flat land, the wind blows, it's cheap land, so the incentives in the US as far as building wind have been, build wind where land is the cheapest and the wind blows the most, and North Dakota really checks those boxes. So there's a lot of wind power generation there, but there's not enough grid capacity when the wind is blowing to transport all of that electricity out to be used by an end user or a load. And so what we've done, because of these workloads, we actually go locate next to the source of power. We utilize a lot of this power that would go unused. We sit right by the substation where about 2 gigawatts of wind feed in, and that's how we're building this. And so we have multiple locations that are like this in the Dakotas. They're around the U.S., but they're being used up, and I think that's kind of the short-term solution for everyone's heard about. There's not enough power to power this. This is kind of the short-term solution for that.
Does everybody know where these stranded power locations are, or do you have to go find them? Do you have to seek these out?
So you had to go and find them, and the history is they're used in, people didn't necessarily locate things because of power availability. Bitcoin was the first for.
You wanted data centers close to the customer.
We want it close to the customer. So Bitcoin was the first kind of big electrical load that could go anywhere, and now we're following on the heels of that with AI factories. They can't go everywhere that you could put Bitcoin facilities, but where you can, if there's fiber, where there's power, then you can build these facilities typically.
So you're out there. Is that a big part of your job? Like you're just like hunting for these things?
So we spent the last 5 years hunting for these locations. We have quite a few of those locations. They're mostly gone at this point, though, as you could imagine. So
so everybody, it was like a land rush, and you signed the deals you could sign,
yes.
but you're competing with the other hyperscalers, et cetera. And
and it was a rush when China cracked down on Bitcoin and everyone was coming to the U.S. But if that was a rush, I don't know. Like this is 100x, right?
It's another level.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have also, when you talk about the deals in these towns, they're not the most popular things to have. Like there's been a bunch of complaints in all the Northern Virginia ones that sort of are, I don't know, most of the internet at this point in the U.S. that they make this humming noise that like drives people crazy. Is that the kind of stuff you have to think about when you're convincing these towns to allow you to build these things?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work. So for everyone's reference, the town that we're building in is 1,100 people in North Dakota. We did a lot of work up front. We were very transparent, and we do that at all of our locations. And I think not doing things kind of behind the scenes or under the cover of night is important, and to get buy-in from these communities for the economic benefit it's going to bring. Also the location, so that there is that noise, but it's a high frequency noise, and so what that means is if you can get a mile away from everyone around you, which is easier to do in North Dakota than probably in Northern Virginia, that noise will attenuate in the air and you won't hear that, and so we won't have those complaints. Or maybe there's one house that maybe hears it if the wind is blowing just kind of perfectly that day. But it is an issue, and it's an important thing for our industry that people do this the right way. I always say that for our company, inside of our company, we need to make sure that we do it the right way, and that is making sure we get buy-in from the communities that we go into, and we make this massive. I mean, we're going to spend $5 billion on this campus, and that's just us. That's not the GPU loads going into this. So if you're going to do that, you need to get buy-in. The way we have done it, actually, you can see published in several news articles, we've lowered the cost of power for everyone in the region because we're utilizing the infrastructure. We're using power that's not there, and so we actually save consumers electricity. That's another big complaint. So we're lowering the cost of power. We're doing it where it's not disruptive to anyone's life that lives there. But you need the community support to build these massive projects.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think another narrative out there is that more demand equals higher prices and power, but you're saying it's the opposite, which is.
I'll be careful with this. So it's the opposite if done in the way that we're doing it. Like I say, in the correct way, in my opinion. But you're taking, when you are utilizing electricity and then you're spreading the cost of the grid out over more megawatts that were going unused, you're going to lower the cost for everyone.
Right. I think the other thing that I don't think people appreciate as much about this is that because of this gold rush, the huge surge in demand, it kind of makes a lot of these innovative, like clean energy ideas profitable, or at least like feasible. Are you working on any deals where it's like you're using geothermal, or like in the future small modular nuclear, anything like that?
So that's further in the future. What we're focused on near term is existing assets, and then also new renewable assets and some gas assets that can be built, in the next 1 to 5 years. Say, I think nuclear is a little further out than that. We're spending time on it, but I do think that's a long-term solution, and we're really focused on, near-term, medium-term solutions right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, is there any of those though that you think are like really exciting? Like, what are your favorites? Like those new ideas?
Well, nuclear is definitely the long-term solution. The SMRs, whether it's large plants or SMRs, battery, I don't see. Battery would be phenomenal, especially with with renewables, right? If you're using solar, you only get power during the day. If you're using wind, only when the wind blows. But if you could store that in a battery solution, but we're not seeing that as economically feasible yet, but that's one of the most interesting for me, because with these massive loads that we have at these sites, you know, there's going to be times where they're not using power and too much power is being generated, and if you can just use the site itself from a battery backup perspective, you can do a lot of grid balancing, overall grid balancing in certain regions of the country as well.
So, and I know you're at least moving into 3 other states, I think you said. Can you name that, like where the other projects are?
So we have several campuses. We have 3 campuses in North Dakota. We have 1 in South Dakota, and then the rest of our projects are right down, you know, the heartland of America, all the way to the Gulf. So we're working on a few other projects there. We're looking at a few things in Europe, but we're really focused on the U.S. right now.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about Europe a little bit while we still have time. What's the climate like in Europe? Is it different than the U.S.?
Yeah, I think it's quite a bit different. It's just, I would say it's a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years behind where the U.S. is. You know, I do think whether it's Europe or South America or Asia, well, Asia is seeing a lot of training, but I don't know that there will ever be massive training facilities like we're building in the U.S. and Europe, but I do see there's going to be a big need for inferencing in Europe, and you're going to see, relative to what's been built here before, much bigger data centers with much higher power density, because as use goes up, right, we see the use numbers on ChatGPT, on Anthropic. As these use cases go up and we get more cases and more products, you're going to need that kind of infrastructure all over Europe and all over every country to service these products.
Okay, we're basically out of time. One last question. NVIDIA has a 3% stake in the company now, right?
Yeah, I believe it's somewhere.
Have you gotten to hang out with Jensen Huang at all?
I have, but mostly with other people at NVIDIA.
Okay, thank you so much. This is really interesting. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.